Hello and welcome to GeekyBit. Today I'd like to talk to you about something that's often mistaken for another thing, and that is 25-pin serial ports, also known as DB25 serial ports, and if those two names weren't enough, it's also known as RS-232. Of course, it was first known as RS-232, and that standard has been around since 1960, and it is over 60 years old to date. Of course, by the 1980s, 25-pin serial ports were the predominant communication serial ports. And by the early to mid-90s, most 25-pin serial ports were starting to be phased out in favor of the smaller DB9 or 9-pin serial ports. By the early 2000s, 25-pin serial ports were pretty much phased out on personal computers, and only 9-pin serial and USB remained for the serial port connections for modern computers of the era. Something interesting, for a long forgotten standard, 25-pin serial port adapters are still sold today. In fact, if you take a look here are 3 prominent online retailers that sell those adapters. Here is a detailed spec sheet for 25-pin serial ports. Feel free to pause the video here and take a look at it. By now you must be thinking, 25-pin serial ports obviously aren't on computers anymore, and I certainly don't see a 9-pin serial port on my computer, so serial ports must be discontinued from modern computers. Except for there, you would be dead wrong. As you can see here are some modern day serial ports. In fact, yes, USB is Universal Serial Bus, which means those are serial ports. Of course, one thing to note, 25-pin serial and 9-pin serial are not directly compatible with USB. With all of that history out of the way, you might be going, what's so good about serial? It's not like we commonly use those ports anymore. And well, serial was good for a lot of things. And in fact, it still is good for a lot of things in certain use cases. Without those old serial ports, communication between computers would have been much harder, as we would have to use niche products and more expensive networking devices. So one of the most important contributions that serial ports have brought to the modern era was the ability to use modems, and with that, the ability to connect to the internet. That's right, if serial ports weren't available and we had no other method of communication, the internet wouldn't have grown in popularity as well as it has today. Let's take a moment to talk about parallel versus 25-pin serial. 25-pin serial and parallel ports can sometimes use the same cables, and they look an awful lot alike because essentially they are the male versus female form of the same connector, but they are fundamentally incompatible with one another. If you take a look here on the back of a computer, 25-pin serial is the male version and 25-pin parallel is the female version of the port. So now I would like to take a moment and talk about my personal history with 25-pin serial. Shortly after I got my 486, I found a 286 at a garage sale that I bought for $10. I wanted to transfer files between the two computers, but one had a 5 1/4 floppy and the other had a 3 1/2. So the only way I knew to transfer files is via serial. I wanted to also use both computers to play SimCity 2000 Network. Of course, I couldn't do that because SimCity 2000 Network required Windows 95 and the 286 couldn't run Windows 95, so I had to give up on that. Ultimately, I failed to get any files moved between the two computers because I didn't know you needed a special crossover serial cable. Later on down the line, I just bought a 5 1/4 floppy inch drive to put in my 486 and was able to copy files that way. Later on that same year, I was able to buy a 2400 baud modem at a garage sale for $3. It allowed me to connect to my very first BBS. It was the first time I'd ever communicated to another computer with my computer. It was absolutely amazing and mind-blowing for me. That 2400 baud modem and that BBS marked the last time I used a 25-pin serial port. As the Christmas of that year, my parents bought me a 28.8K modem card. We got unlimited internet access, a second phone line, and I learned about Mosaic and never looked back. I got a job at a local computer shop and installed all kinds of 25-pin serial ports. However, I personally never used 25-pin serial ports after 1996. So here are my thoughts on 25-pin serial. It's amazing that it's had such a long life, and the fact that we still use serial ports on our computers today is also amazing. I think it is is really sad that a port that has been around as long as this is still mistaken by young tech experts and enthusiasts as a parallel port. I do hope this video has gone a long way to help change that though. Given that 25-pin serial ports have been around for over 60 years and they are still used today, I wonder if modern USB will still be relevant in 60 years from now. Thanks for watching this episode of Tech History. I hope you enjoyed the contents, and if you did, feel free to like, subscribe if you aren't already, and remember to click that bell button to get notifications of future videos.